Remove her now. This aircraft does not wait for people who cannot follow the rules." Captain Richard Vaughan's voice came through the cabin speakers before the plane had even pushed back from the gate. It was sharp and patient, and loud enough to silence every conversation in first class. Naomi Carter sat in C-2A beside the window, her hands folded over a slim leather portfolio resting on her lap. She wore a cream-colored coat, dark slacks, and low black heels. Nothing about her outfit announced wealth. Nothing about her quiet posture invited attention. Yet nearly every face in the cabin had turned toward her. Outside the window, rain streaked across the glass as baggage carts moved beneath the wing lights. Inside, the air smelled like coffee, leather seats, and the expensive perfume of people who expected their flights to leave on time. Naomi had boarded 20 minutes earlier with a valid first-class ticket, a boarding pass in her name, and a carry-on bag that fit neatly beneath the seat in front of her. She had smiled at the gate agent. She had thanked the flight attendant. She had taken her seat without asking for anything. But the moment the white man in 2B arrived, the mood changed. He had stopped in the aisle, looked at Naomi, then looked at the seat number above her, as if the plane itself had made a mistake. "Excuse me," he had said to the flight attendant. "I believe there is a seating issue." The flight attendant, a woman named Denise Harper, had checked Naomi's boarding pass once. Then twice. Then a third time. Each time, Naomi handed it over without raising her voice. Each time, Denise looked more suspicious, not less. "Ma'am," Denise said now, standing beside Naomi's seat with a tight smile, "we need you to come with us while we verify your travel documents." Naomi looked up at her. "You have already verified them 3 times. Denise glanced toward the front of the cabin. "There has been a concern." Naomi's eyes moved briefly to the man in 2B, who was still standing in the aisle with his expensive coat draped over one arm. He did not look embarrassed. He looked annoyed. "A concern about what?" Naomi asked. Denise lowered her voice. "Please do not make this difficult." Naomi's expression did not change. "I am not making anything difficult. I am asking a question." Around them, passengers pretended not to listen. A woman near the window lifted her phone slightly. A businessman across the aisle stared at his laptop screen without typing. In C3C, Ethan Morales, a young attorney traveling to Washington, looked from Naomi's ticket to the faces of the crew. He had watched 3 other passengers board with oversized bags, delayed boarding lines, and argue about overhead space. None of them had been asked to show identification again. Naomi reached into her portfolio and placed her boarding pass on the armrest. The paper was crisp. Her name was printed clearly. C2A. First class. Flight 728 to Washington, D.C. "You have checked my ticket," Naomi said, her voice calm enough that everyone heard it. "You have not checked your assumptions." The cabin went still. Denise's smile disappeared. At the front of the plane, 2 airport security officers appeared near the cockpit door. Captain Vaughn stood behind them, his uniform pressed perfectly, his face set with the confidence of a man who believed his authority ended every question. He looked directly at Naomi. "Ma'am," he said, "you need to leave this aircraft." Naomi looked out at the rain sliding down the window, then back at him. Her fingers closed gently around the leather portfolio. In less than an hour, she was supposed to be in Washington for a private meeting that could determine the future of this airline. But Captain Vaughn did not know that. Not yet. Naomi did not stand immediately. She looked at Captain Richard Vaughn with the same calm attention she had given Denise Harper when the flight attendant checked her boarding pass for the 3rd time. The captain stood near the cockpit door with 2 airport security officers beside him, his navy uniform crisp, his shoulders squared, and his expression already settled into judgment. Behind him, The open cabin door framed the gray light of the jet bridge. Outside, rain tapped softly against the aircraft windows, but inside first class, the silence had become heavier than the weather. "Before I leave," Naomi said, "I would like to know what rule you believe I broke." Captain Vaughn's mouth tightened. "This is not a debate. It is a question," Naomi replied, "and I have asked it politely." Denise Harper shifted beside the aisle. Her name tag caught the overhead light as she looked from Naomi to the captain. "There was a passenger concern," she said. Naomi turned toward the man assigned to seat 2B. He was still standing with one hand on the overhead compartment, his expensive wool coat folded over his arm. His face reddened when Naomi looked directly at him. "What concern?" Naomi asked. He gave a small laugh, as though the answer should have been obvious. "I just think there has been a mistake." "With my seat?" Naomi asked. "With the whole situation," he said. Ethan Morales, seated in 3C, closed his laptop. He had been watching quietly, but now he leaned into the aisle. "Her boarding pass says 2A, he said. "You have all seen it." Captain Vaughn looked at him. "Sir, this does not involve you." Ethan did not raise his voice. "It involves everyone when a passenger is singled out without an explanation." A few heads turned. A woman in 1D lowered her phone after recording for several seconds. An older couple across the aisle exchanged uneasy looks. Naomi reached into her leather portfolio and removed a small notebook. She wrote down the captain's name, Denise Harper's name, the flight number, and the time displayed on the cabin screen. Then she looked at the two security officers. "Please state your names and badge numbers," she said. One officer hesitated. The other spoke first. "Officer Daniel Reyes, badge 4187. Naomi wrote it down. The second officer gave his name as Officer Claire Morgan. Neither officer looked comfortable. They had been called to remove a passenger, but Naomi was seated calmly with her documents in order. There was no shouting, no disruption, no explanation that matched the captain's demand. Captain Vaughn stepped forward. "Ma'am, you are delaying this flight." Naomi closed the notebook. "No, Captain. The people who questioned a valid ticket are delaying this flight." His eyes narrowed. "You need to leave now." Naomi looked around the cabin. She saw people who had chosen silence because silence was easier. She saw the man in 2B avoiding her eyes. She saw Denise trying to look professional while uncertainty moved across her face. Then Naomi rose from her seat with measured grace. She lifted her carry-on from beneath the seat and placed the portfolio against her side. "I will leave," she said, "but I want the record to be accurate. I did not refuse an instruction. I was removed from a seat I paid for after being treated as suspicious without cause." Ethan stood too. "I will be a witness," he said. Captain Vaughn gave him a hard look, but Ethan did not sit back down. Naomi moved toward the open cabin door, her steps quiet on the carpet. As she passed Captain Vaughn, she paused just long enough to say, "You made a decision about me before you knew anything about me." Then she stepped onto the jet bridge, leaving behind a first-class cabin that suddenly felt much smaller than it had 5 minutes earlier. The jet bridge was colder than Naomi expected. The air carried the smell of rain, metal, and jet fuel, and the glass walls showed the runway blurred beneath a silver sky. Behind her, the aircraft door remained open. She could hear the low movement of the cabin, the muted voices of passengers who had watched her leave, and the faint mechanical hum of a plane that was supposed to be heading toward Washington, D.C. Naomi set her carry-on beside the wall and looked through the glass at the wing. Her reflection stared back at her, a black woman in a cream-colored coat, standing alone between the terminal and a plane that had decided she did not belong. Officer Claire Morgan stood a few feet away, holding a tablet with the flight information. She had not said much inside the cabin. Now her expression had softened. "Miss Carter," she said quietly, "I need to ask whether you would like to file a formal complaint." Naomi looked at her. "I will do more than file a complaint." Officer Morgan nodded slowly. "I understand." Naomi opened her leather portfolio and removed her phone. The screen showed 7:42 in the morning. In 48 minutes, she was supposed to be seated in a private conference room in Washington, D.C., across from the airline's executive team, its lenders, and its board chair. The meeting had been scheduled for months. Carter Capital was preparing to finalize a $5 billion financing package that would help the airline replace aging aircraft, stabilize routes, and fund a major sustainability program. Naomi had kept her role quiet because she preferred it that way. She had learned long ago that people revealed more about themselves when they did not know who was listening. She pressed one number. Her executive assistant answered before the second ring. "Good morning, Miss Carter. Your car is waiting at Reagan, and the briefing materials are ready." Naomi's voice was calm. "Cancel the car." There was a pause. "Is your flight delayed?" "No," Naomi said. "I was removed from it." Her assistant went silent. Naomi continued. "Open a secure line with our general counsel, our chief investment officer, and the chair of the airline financing committee. Put a temporary hold on every pending release connected to Horizon Air." The name seemed to change the temperature of the jet bridge. Officer Morgan glanced toward the plane. Naomi's assistant spoke carefully. "All $5 billion? "Every dollar," Naomi said. "No funds move until I say otherwise." The assistant did not ask why. She had worked with Naomi long enough to understand the difference between anger and decision. "Understood," she said. "The hold will be in place within minutes." Naomi ended the call and stood quietly for a moment. She did not feel victorious. She felt tired. Her father had spent 30 years maintaining aircraft for another airline, working night shifts and missing holidays so passengers could arrive safely. He had taught her to respect every person who made travel possible, from the baggage crew to the flight deck. But he had also taught her something else. "Never confuse a uniform with character," he used to say. Naomi looked through the glass at Captain Vaughn's plane. A gate agent hurried toward the jet bridge from the terminal, her face tense as she carried a headset in one hand. Behind her, another airline employee was already speaking urgently into a phone. Naomi picked up her carry-on. The flight had not left the gate, but the decision that would change everything had already taken off. The gate agent stopped a few feet from Naomi, her face pale beneath the fluorescent lights. She looked from Naomi to Officer Claire Morgan, then toward the open aircraft door where Captain Richard Vaughn remained out of sight. "Miss Carter?" she asked carefully. Naomi nodded. "My name is Alicia Bennett. I am the gate supervisor. I have been told there may have been a misunderstanding." Naomi held the handle of her carry-on and looked at the woman without anger. "A misunderstanding is when two people hear different words. This was a decision." Alicia swallowed. Her headset crackled with voices from the operations desk. Naomi could hear only fragments. "Financing hold. Executive office. Do not depart." The words moved through the jet bridge faster than the rain outside. Alicia lowered her voice. "Would you be willing to return to the cabin so we can resolve this privately?" Naomi looked through the glass at the aircraft. "I was asked to leave publicly." Alicia did not have an answer. Behind her, a man in a dark suit hurried down the jet bridge carrying a tablet. He introduced himself as Daniel Price, Regional Operations Director for Horizon Air. His smile appeared quickly, but it did not reach his eyes. "Miss Carter, I understand there has been an unfortunate incident," he said. "We value every passenger. Naomi's gaze stayed steady. Then you should have valued me before someone learned my name. Daniel's smile faded. He glanced at his tablet, then at Officer Morgan. The executive office has requested that the aircraft remain at the gate pending review. Naomi nodded once. That is appropriate. Daniel shifted his weight. Your investment team has placed a hold on the financing package. I am sure this can be corrected quickly. It can be investigated quickly, Naomi said. Correction takes more than an apology. Inside the cabin, Ethan Morales had remained in his seat. The man in 2B had finally taken his place, but he looked uncomfortable now, staring at the empty seat beside him. Denise Harper stood near the galley, listening to a call from the operations desk. Her face had changed when she heard the name Naomi Carter. She had spent the last 20 minutes believing she was following procedure. Now she was beginning to understand that procedure had been shaped by assumptions no manual could excuse. Captain Vaughn stepped into the jet bridge. He walked toward Naomi with measured confidence, but his expression was no longer certain. Miss Carter, he said, I have been informed of your position with Carter Capital. Naomi looked at him. You were informed after you removed me. I acted on information provided by my crew, he replied. And what information was that? Naomi asked. The captain paused. There was a concern about seating and passenger conduct. What conduct? Naomi asked. What rule? Daniel Price looked away. Officer Morgan remained silent. Captain Vaughn's face tightened. I am not here to argue. Naomi's voice stayed calm. Neither am I. I am here to make sure the record is true. She opened her notebook and showed him the names, badge numbers, flight number, and time she had written down. You removed a black woman with a valid first-class ticket because someone decided she did not look like she belonged there. That is not a seating issue. That is a failure of judgment. The captain looked toward the open cabin door. For the first time, he seemed to understand that the flight was no longer waiting on Naomi. It was waiting on the truth. Captain Vaughn did not answer right away. The jet bridge felt narrower now, crowded with people who had arrived too late to prevent what had already happened. Daniel Price stood near the terminal door with his tablet pressed against his chest. Alicia Bennett listened to a new message through her headset. Officer Claire Morgan remained beside Naomi, quiet but attentive. And through the open aircraft door, the passengers in first class could see enough to understand that the empty seat in 2A had become the center of something much larger than a delayed departure. Naomi looked at Captain Vaughn and waited. She did not need to raise her voice. She had spent years in boardrooms where men tried to fill the room with certainty before they had earned it. She knew that silence could be more demanding than anger. The passenger in 2B raised a concern, the captain said finally. My crew responded to it. Naomi glanced toward the cabin. The man in 2B was looking down at his hands now. A concern is not evidence, she said. And your crew had my ticket in front of them. Captain Vaughn's expression tightened. We have to protect the safety and comfort of everyone on board. Naomi nodded slowly. Safety matters. But comfort cannot mean removing the only black woman in first class because someone else is uncomfortable seeing her there. Daniel Price stepped forward. Miss Carter, Horizon Air does not tolerate discrimination. Naomi turned toward him. Then do not make me prove that it happened before you take it seriously. The operations director looked down at his tablet. A message had appeared from the executive office. The financing hold was confirmed. Every pending release from Carter Capital had been paused. The airline's planned fleet modernization announcement, scheduled for later that morning, was now in question. Daniel understood the numbers. $5 billion was not simply an investment. It was fuel for future routes, aircraft leases, maintenance upgrades, and lender confidence. But Naomi's face showed him that money was not the point. Respect had been the point before anyone opened a spreadsheet. "What do you want us to do?" he asked. Naomi considered the question. Rain slid down the glass walls in long silver lines. Far below, a baggage cart moved slowly across the wet tarmac. "First," she said, "the aircraft does not leave until an independent team reviews what happened. Second, every passenger who witnessed this is given a way to submit a statement without pressure. Third, no one in this airline contacts me privately to offer a quiet apology and make this disappear." Captain Vaughn looked at her. "You are grounding an entire flight over a misunderstanding." Naomi's eyes met his. "No, Captain. Your choices grounded this flight." Behind him, Denise Harper appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, and her voice was unsteady when she spoke. "Captain, operations wants you on the line." He turned toward her. "Tell them I am handling it." Denise looked at Naomi, then back at him. "They said you are not to make any further decisions about this flight." The words settled heavily in the jet bridge. Captain Vaughn stood still. Daniel Price checked his tablet again. A new instruction had arrived from corporate leadership. The captain, lead flight attendant, and gate supervisor were to be removed from passenger-facing duties pending an initial review. Alicia closed her eyes briefly. Denise lowered her gaze. Naomi did not look pleased. She only looked tired. "This is not about punishing people for one moment," she said. "It is about finding out how many moments like this happened before nobody important was watching." Ethan Morales stepped out of the cabin and into the jet bridge, holding his phone at his side. "I saw what happened," he said, "and I will give a statement." Naomi looked at him and nodded. Then the boarding door behind them began to close, not for departure, but because the airline had finally stopped pretending the flight could continue as if nothing had happened. The closed boarding door separated the jet bridge from the cabin, but it could not separate the airline from what had happened inside. Through the narrow window, Naomi could still see passengers standing in the aisle, gathering their bags as gate staff explained that the flight would not depart. Some looked frustrated. Some looked embarrassed. A few looked relieved that someone had finally said what they had been thinking. Ethan Morales stood beside Naomi with his phone in one hand and his laptop bag over his shoulder. "I sent my statement to the address they gave us," he said. "I also sent the video to my firm." Naomi looked at him. "Thank you for speaking up." Ethan nodded. "I should have spoken sooner." Naomi understood that feeling. Most people did not stay silent because they were cruel. They stayed silent because they hoped someone else would take the risk first. But silence still had consequences. It left the person being targeted alone in a room full of witnesses. Daniel Price's tablet buzzed again. He read the message, then looked toward Naomi with a mixture of concern and disbelief. "The board chair is requesting a call with you," he said. "Not yet," Naomi replied. "My legal team will speak with the board after the independent review begins." Daniel hesitated. "The financing committee is asking whether the hold can be limited to the current release." Naomi adjusted the strap of her portfolio. "No. The hold applies to every pending release, every guarantee, and every meeting connected to Carter Capital." Daniel's expression tightened. "That will affect the entire airline." "Then the airline should have thought about that before treating dignity as optional," Naomi said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the jet bridge. Captain Vaughn stood near the terminal entrance, no longer speaking into the radio. Denise Harper sat on a bench with her hands folded in her lap. Alicia Bennett had stepped aside to make a report. None of them looked at Naomi now. They looked at the floor, at their phones, at the consequences moving faster than any flight schedule. Naomi's phone rang. It was her general counsel, Priya Shah. "The hold is active," Priya said. "The airline's lenders have been notified that the transaction is paused pending review." We are also preserving all communications related to your removal from the flight. Naomi looked through the glass at the rain-covered runway. Good. Make sure the notice is clear. This is not retaliation for embarrassment. It is a governance decision based on discriminatory treatment and operational risk. Priya paused. Do you want us to issue a statement? Naomi thought of the passenger still waiting behind the closed door. She thought of her father's hands, rough from decades of aircraft work, and the way he had believed every traveler deserved to be treated with basic respect. Not yet, she said. First, I want the airline to tell the truth. A new group of employees approached from the terminal, wearing corporate badges and serious expressions. One woman introduced herself as Lauren Whitfield, head of Horizon Air Compliance. She carried a folder and a small recorder. Miss Carter, she said, we are beginning the initial review. We would like to hear your account. Naomi looked at the recorder, then at the aircraft behind the glass. You will hear it, she said, but you will also hear from the people who watched. Lauren nodded. That is the plan. Naomi took a slow breath. The morning had begun with a captain telling the cabin that the aircraft would not wait for someone who could not follow the rules. Now the aircraft sat at the gate, its schedule broken, its leadership scrambling, and its future tied to the truth of one moment. Naomi picked up her carry-on. Then start with the rule that was broken, she said. It was not mine. Lauren Whitfield led Naomi into a quiet conference room just beyond the gate area, where rain blurred the terminal windows and the sound of delayed passengers rolled through the hallway like distant thunder. The room was small, practical, and too plain for the size of the decision now hanging over Horizon Air. A recorder sat in the center of the table. A compliance attorney opened a laptop. Ethan Morales waited outside with other passengers who had agreed to provide statements. Naomi placed her leather portfolio on the table and remained standing for a moment. She had spent years entering rooms where people suddenly became careful after learning her title. But this room was not about titles. It was about what happened before anyone knew who she was. Lauren looked tired, but her voice was steady. Miss Carter, I want to be clear. This review is independent from flight operations. We are preserving the cabin footage, gate records, crew communications, and passenger statements. Naomi nodded. Good. Preserve the boarding data too. I want to know whether any other passenger was asked to verify a valid first-class ticket 3 times. The compliance attorney typed quickly. We will include that. Naomi sat down. For a moment, she looked at the rain sliding down the window. It reminded her of mornings years ago when she would wait for her father after his overnight shift at the airport. He would come home exhausted, smelling faintly of coffee and cold air, but he always had time to ask about school. He taught her that airports were built on trust. People trusted pilots, crews, mechanics, gate agents, and strangers they would never meet. That trust was not a luxury. It was the first thing every passenger handed over when they boarded. Captain Vaughn said he was responding to a passenger concern, Lauren said. Did the passenger say anything directly to you? Naomi's eyes lowered briefly. He said there had been a mistake. Then he said he thought there was a problem with the whole situation. The attorney paused. Did he explain what he meant? No, Naomi said. He did not need to. Everyone around him understood. Lauren's expression tightened. And the crew? They treated his discomfort like evidence. The recorder captured every word. Naomi described Denise checking her boarding pass repeatedly. She described Captain Vaughn using the speaker system to announce that the aircraft would not wait for people who could not follow the rules. She described how neither the captain nor the crew named a rule she had broken. She did not exaggerate. She did not need to. The facts were enough. When she finished, Lauren closed the folder in front of her. "I am sorry," she said. Naomi looked at her. "I appreciate that, but apologies cannot be the end of this." Lauren nodded. "What would meaningful action look like to you?" Naomi thought for a moment. "An outside investigation. Public findings. Training that is measured by outcomes, not attendance. A clear process for passengers to report discrimination without being ignored. And a fund for people who lose work, miss connections, or face harm because an airline made assumptions about them." The compliance attorney stopped typing for a second. Lauren looked at Naomi with a new kind of attention. "You have thought about this before," she said. Naomi gave a small, tired smile. "Every black traveler has thought about this before." Outside the conference room, a corporate announcement began playing over the terminal speakers. The flight to Washington, D.C. had been canceled. Passengers were being rebooked. But inside that small room, something larger had begun. Naomi opened her portfolio and placed the pause financing agreement on the table. "This money will not move until your policies do," she said. "Because a company does not earn trust by saying the right words after a crisis. It earns trust by changing what allowed the crisis to happen." The announcement that Flight 728 had been canceled moved through the terminal in a wave of frustration, rolling luggage, and hurried questions. Naomi heard it from the conference room, but she did not move. She knew every passenger had somewhere to be. Some had meetings, families, medical appointments, weddings, interviews, and connections that would now have to be rearranged. Their inconvenience was real. But so was the reason the flight had stopped. Lauren Whitfield sat across from Naomi with a pause financing agreement between them, reading the final page again as if the numbers might change if she looked long enough. $5 billion. It was more than a deal. It was the bridge Horizon Air had planned to use to rebuild confidence with lenders, expand its routes, and replace aircraft that had become too expensive to maintain. Lauren looked up. "The board is meeting in 30 minutes, she said. "They want to speak with you directly." Naomi folded her hands on the table. "They can speak with my counsel." Lauren hesitated. "They are prepared to apologize. They should prepare to answer questions," Naomi said. The compliance attorney's laptop chimed. A new file had arrived from the airline operations system. Cabin camera footage. Gate communications. Crew notes. Lauren opened the file, and the room became quiet as the recording began. The video showed Naomi entering the aircraft with her boarding pass in hand. It showed Denise Harper checking the pass once, then again. It showed the passenger in 2B leaning toward Denise and speaking in a low voice. The audio was unclear, but the next moments were not. Denise looked at Naomi differently after that conversation. Captain Vaughn was called. Security was summoned. No one in the footage pointed to a rule violation. No one described a safety concern. The decision formed in plain sight, built from discomfort, assumption, and the confidence that nobody would challenge it. Lauren stopped the video. Her face had lost color. "This is worse than I expected," she said. Naomi looked at the frozen image on the screen. "It is worse because it was recorded. That does not mean it was unusual." The words stayed with Lauren. Outside the conference room, Ethan Morales was speaking with a member of the airline's legal team. He had submitted his video, along with a written statement describing the captain's announcement and the silence that followed. Several passengers had done the same. One woman admitted that she had wanted to speak up, but had been afraid of missing her connection. Another said she had assumed the crew must know something she did not. Naomi understood both responses. Systems like this survived because they made ordinary people doubt what they had seen. Lauren's phone rang. She answered, listened for less than a minute, then placed it face down on the table. "The board has suspended Captain Vaughn, Denise Harper, and the gate team from duty pending the investigation," she said. Naomi did not react with satisfaction. "Suspension is not reform," she said. "It is only the beginning of accountability." Lauren nodded. "The board is also asking whether Carter Capital will reconsider the hold if they issue a public statement today." Naomi reached for the financing agreement and closed it. "A statement today will not restore trust tomorrow." She stood and picked up her portfolio. "Tell the board that the funds remain paused until the independent investigation is complete, the findings are public, and the airline accepts measurable changes." Lauren looked at her. "And if they refuse?" Naomi's eyes moved to the rain-covered runway, where Flight 728 still sat at the gate with no destination in sight. "Then they will learn that the cost of ignoring people is never as small as they thought." Naomi left the conference room with her portfolio under one arm, and the weight of the morning settled quietly across her shoulders. The terminal was louder now. Passengers from the canceled flight stood in lines near the customer service desk, some speaking into phones, some accepting new boarding passes, some looking back toward the gate as if they still could not believe one empty first-class seat had changed the entire day. Ethan Morales waited near the windows, his suitcase beside him. When he saw Naomi, he stepped forward. "They asked me if I wanted to stay anonymous," he said. Naomi looked at him. "What did you tell them?" "I told them no," Ethan replied. "If you had to stand alone in that cabin, I can put my name on what I saw." Naomi nodded slowly. "That matters." Ethan looked toward the aircraft, still parked at the gate beneath the rain. "Do you think they will really change?" Naomi considered the question. "They will change if enough people decide that silence is no longer convenient." Before Ethan could answer, Naomi's phone rang. Priya Shah was on the line again. "The board has started its emergency meeting," Priya said. "Their lenders are asking for clarification, and the market is already reacting to reports that the financing package is paused." Naomi walked toward a quieter corner of the terminal. "Have we received the formal request from the board?" "Yes," Priya said. "They want a private call with you, the board chair, and the chief executive officer. They are offering an immediate public apology and a personal apology from the captain." Naomi looked through the glass at the wet runway. "An apology is not a remedy." "I know," Priya said. "What do you want me to tell them?" Naomi's answer came without hesitation. "Tell them Carter Capital will not discuss the financing until Horizon Air agrees to an independent civil rights review, releases the findings publicly, creates a passenger protection process with outside oversight, and gives every employee decision-making training that is tested in real situations." Priya was quiet for a moment. "That is a major condition." "So was $5 billion, Naomi said. Across the terminal, Daniel Price stood near the gate desk speaking urgently with two executives who had just arrived. One of them was the airline's chief executive officer, Thomas Weller, a white man in his early 60s, with a dark overcoat and a face that looked carefully composed. He saw Naomi and walked toward her with his hand extended. Naomi ended the call, but did not take his hand. "Miss Carter," Thomas said, "I am deeply sorry for what happened." Naomi looked at him. "Are you sorry because it happened, or because the money stopped?" His hand lowered slowly. The executives behind him looked away. Thomas took a breath. "Both can be true." Naomi nodded. "Then prove the first one before you ask about the second." He glanced at the gate, where passengers continued to wait. "This incident has put the company in a difficult position." "It put me in a difficult position first," Naomi replied. "And it has put other people in difficult positions long before today." Thomas studied her for a moment. He had come expecting a negotiation. Instead, he found a boundary. "The board will consider your conditions," he said. Naomi picked up her carry-on. They should also consider why it took a financing hold for anyone to ask what happened. As she walked away, Ethan followed at a respectful distance. Behind them, the executives remained near the gate, watching the woman they had tried to remove become the person holding the future of their airline in her hands. Naomi did not go far. She stopped near a row of windows overlooking the runway, where the rain had softened into a thin gray mist, and the aircraft lights reflected across the wet pavement. Ethan Morales stood beside her, giving her the kind of space that did not feel like distance. Behind them, Thomas Weller and his executives remained near the gate, speaking in low voices while their phones continued to ring. The airline had spent years building a brand around comfort, reliability, and trust. Now one decision in first class had exposed how quickly those words could collapse when they were not matched by action. Naomi's phone vibrated again. This time, it was Priya Shah with a message from the board. Horizon Air had agreed to suspend the financing discussions, authorize an independent civil rights investigation, and preserve all records connected to the flight. But there was one condition they wanted from Naomi. They wanted her to join a private call before the news reached the public. Naomi read the message twice, then looked at Ethan. "They still want to control the story," she said. Ethan nodded. "What are you going to do?" Naomi looked toward Flight 728. The aircraft sat silent at the gate, its doors closed, its departure board changed from delayed to canceled. She thought about every person who had been told to stay calm while being treated unfairly. Every traveler who had been asked to explain why they belonged in a seat, a lounge, a line, or a country club. She had the power to make this one incident disappear behind closed doors. But that was exactly how systems protected themselves. "I will take the call," she said. "But it will not be private." Priya connected the line through a secure conference link. Naomi stood by the window with her phone on speaker, while Ethan remained nearby as a witness. The board chair introduced herself first, followed by Thomas Weller and several directors. Their voices sounded careful, rehearsed, and strained. "Miss Carter," the board chair said, "we want to express our sincere regret for the incident this morning." Naomi listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Before we discuss regret, I need one question answered. Did anyone in this company believe a valid ticket was not enough because I was a black woman sitting in first class?" The line went quiet. Thomas Weller cleared his throat. "We do not have all the facts yet. You have enough facts to know I was removed without a rule violation," Naomi said. "And you have enough facts to know that your crew treated another passenger's discomfort as authority." One director spoke carefully. "We are committed to a full review." "Then commit to the public," Naomi replied. "Not to me. To every passenger who has been told that their experience was too small to matter." The board chair paused. "What exactly are you requesting?" Naomi opened her portfolio and looked at the paused agreement. "A public independent investigation. Release of the findings. An outside passenger civil rights council with authority to review complaints. Mandatory scenario-based training for flight crews, gate teams, and executives. A compensation and support fund for travelers harmed by discriminatory treatment. And written protections that prevent employees from using vague passenger discomfort as a reason to remove someone with valid documents." The silence returned, longer this time. Naomi could hear a faint rustle of papers on the other end. Then Thomas Weller spoke. "Those are significant demands." Naomi looked at the rain lifting from the runway. "So is the trust you lost." The board chair finally answered. "We will take these conditions to a vote today." Naomi ended the call without another word. A few minutes later, a message appeared from Priya. The board had voted unanimously to accept the conditions and appoint an outside review panel. Naomi read the message, then closed her phone. Ethan looked at her. Does that mean the money goes back? Naomi picked up her carry-on. Not yet, she said. A promise is where accountability starts. Proof is where trust returns. The news traveled faster than Naomi expected. By noon, short clips from the cabin had spread across social media, showing the moment Denise Harper checked her boarding pass again and the moment Captain Vaughn announced that the aircraft would not wait for someone who could not follow the rules. The videos did not show every detail, but they showed enough. They showed Naomi sitting quietly. They showed her valid ticket. They showed the silence of the people around her. And they showed the empty seat she left behind. Horizon Air released a brief statement acknowledging the canceled flight and confirming that an independent review had begun. The statement did not mention Naomi's name. It did not mention the $5 billion financing hold. It did not mention why the flight had stopped. But people connected the pieces quickly. Reporters gathered outside the airline's headquarters. Travel analysts began asking whether the financing pause could affect the company's fleet plans. Employees across the country opened the statement on their phones and wondered what the investigation would uncover. Naomi sat in a quiet airport lounge with Ethan Morales across from her. Her flight to Washington had been rescheduled on another airline, but she had not boarded yet. She had one more call to make. Priya Shah joined by video from Carter Capital's offices. The board has accepted every condition in writing, Priya said. They have also asked whether you will meet with Thomas Weller before you leave. Naomi looked at the window, where the rain had finally stopped. What does he want? He says he wants to apologize without lawyers in the room. Ethan looked up from his coffee, but said nothing. Naomi thought about the captain, the flight attendant, the man in 2B, and the executives who had only begun listening when the numbers became too large to ignore. Tell him he can apologize in the same place where I was asked to leave, she said. 20 minutes later, Naomi stood near the gate entrance beside the closed door to Flight 728. Thomas Weller arrived alone, without his executives, without a camera crew, and without the polished smile he had worn earlier. He stopped a few feet away. Miss Carter, he said, I am sorry. Naomi waited. Thomas looked toward the aircraft, still parked at the gate. I am sorry that our employees treated you with disrespect. I am sorry that our systems did not stop it. And I am sorry that it took a financial crisis for me to understand the seriousness of it. Naomi studied his face. The apology was not perfect. It could not be. But it was more honest than the first one. What will you do when this is no longer on the news? She asked. Thomas nodded slowly. That is the question I have to answer every day from now on. Naomi held his gaze. Then do not make the answer depend on whether a powerful person is watching. Thomas looked down. I will not. Naomi did not offer forgiveness on behalf of everyone who had been mistreated before her. She did not restore the money. She simply said, the review panel will decide whether your actions match your words. Thomas nodded again. As he walked away, Ethan joined Naomi near the gate. Do you think he meant it? He asked. Naomi watched Thomas disappear into the terminal crowd. Meaning it is not enough, she said. What matters is what he does when nobody is forcing him to care. Her phone buzzed with a message from Priya. The independent panel had been announced, and the first public hearing would take place in 30 days. Naomi picked up her carry-on. The airline had not been saved. Not yet. But for the first time, it had been required to face the people it had spent too long overlooking. 30 days later, the public hearing room was filled before the first speaker reached the microphone. Reporters lined the back wall with cameras and notebooks. Airline employees sat in the side rows, some in uniform, some in business clothes, all watching the independent panel take their seats beneath the Horizon Air logo. Naomi Carter entered quietly through a side door with Priya Shah beside her. She wore a navy suit, simple earrings, and the same calm expression she had carried onto Flight 728. This time, no one questioned whether she belonged in the room. But Naomi had not come to be recognized. She had come because the room was finally required to listen. The panel chair, a retired federal judge named Andrea Mills, opened the hearing with a clear statement. This review will examine the events of Flight 728, the decisions made by airline personnel, and the broader policies that may have allowed discriminatory treatment to occur. The words were formal, but their meaning reached far beyond one canceled flight. Ethan Morales sat near the front with other passengers who had agreed to speak. When his name was called, he walked to the microphone and described what he saw. He described Naomi's ticket being checked again and again. He described the passenger in 2B questioning her presence. He described the captain's announcement and the way the cabin had gone silent. I kept thinking someone else would say something, Ethan told the panel. I learned that waiting for someone else is still a choice. After him came a flight attendant from another route, a black woman named Tasha Green, who spoke about passenger complaints she had seen dismissed as misunderstandings. Then came a father who said his teenage daughter had been questioned repeatedly while traveling alone, even though her documents were valid. One story followed another, different in detail but familiar in shape. People had been made to feel like they needed permission to occupy spaces they had paid for. When Naomi's name was called, the room grew quiet. She walked to the microphone and placed both hands on the podium. I did not pause the financing because I wanted revenge, she said. I paused it because a company asking for trust must be willing to examine what it does with power. She looked toward the Horizon Air executives seated at the front. Thomas Weller was there, listening without interruption. Captain Vaughn and Denise Harper were not in the room. Their employment review was still ongoing, separate from the public hearing. What happened to me was not an isolated inconvenience, Naomi continued. It was the result of a belief that some people have to prove they belong more than others. That belief does not disappear because a company writes a statement. It disappears when policies, training, leadership, and accountability change together. The panel chair thanked her, then announced the first recommendations. A permanent passenger civil rights council with independent members, public quarterly reporting on discrimination complaints, new procedures requiring specific documented reasons before a passenger could be removed, and mandatory training that included real-world scenarios and measurable evaluation. The room remained quiet, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of people looking away. It was the silence of people hearing something they could not ignore. Priya leaned toward Naomi as she returned to her seat. The board has approved the reforms, she whispered. Naomi nodded once. Then now they have to live by them. Outside the hearing room, the airline stock price continued to move with every headline. Inside, the future of Horizon Air was being measured by something more important than numbers: whether it could learn to treat every passenger as fully human. 3 months after the hearing, Naomi Carter walked through the same terminal where Flight 728 had been canceled. The rain was gone. Morning sunlight poured through the wide glass windows, reflecting off polished floors and the rolling wheels of suitcases. Travelers moved toward their gates with coffee cups, backpacks, business bags, and sleepy children holding their parents' hands. It looked like any other airport morning. But Naomi noticed the changes. Near the security entrance, a new sign explained passenger rights in clear language. At every gate, employees wore small badges that read "Respect is part of the journey." A digital screen near the departure board listed a confidential reporting number and the name of the Independent Passenger Civil Rights Council. The changes were not perfect. Naomi knew that signs could be printed faster than habits could change. But policies had been rewritten, staff had been retrained, and the first public report had been released for everyone to read. The report did not hide the airline's failures. It named the gaps, the complaints, and the work still left to do. That honesty mattered. Priya Shah walked beside Naomi, carrying a slim folder with the final review documents. "The panel confirmed full compliance with the first phase," she said. "The board has approved every safeguard we required." Naomi nodded. "And the financing?" Priya looked at her. "It is your decision." They stopped near the window overlooking the runway. A Horizon Air aircraft waited at the gate, bright in the morning sun. Naomi remembered the cold jet bridge, the captain's voice, and the moment she had been asked to leave a seat that was rightfully hers. She remembered the passengers who had looked away. She remembered Ethan standing up when it mattered. She remembered her father's words about trust. "Release the first portion," Naomi said. Priya smiled slightly. "With the oversight terms?" "With every oversight term," Naomi replied. "Trust is not restored because someone says sorry. It is restored because they keep choosing better when it costs them something." Across the terminal, Thomas Weller approached without an entourage. He no longer carried the polished confidence of a man expecting a private solution. He looked older than he had 3 months earlier, but he also looked more present. "Miss Carter," he said. Naomi turned toward him. "Mr. Weller." He glanced at the aircraft outside. "The first report is difficult reading." "It should be," Naomi said. Thomas nodded. "We have had employees tell us they finally feel safe raising concerns. We have passengers telling us they noticed the changes." "That does not erase what happened." "No," Naomi said. "It does not." He looked at her carefully. "Why release the funding now?" Naomi looked through the glass at the people walking toward their gates. "Because accountability is supposed to create a path forward, not just a punishment." Thomas lowered his eyes, then nodded. "We will keep earning it." Naomi picked up her carry-on and walked toward her gate. This time, she was not boarding a flight because she needed anyone's approval. She was boarding because the seat was hers, the journey was hers, and her dignity had never depended on what strangers assumed when they saw her. Behind her, the terminal moved forward with its ordinary rhythm. Ahead of her, the boarding door stood open. Naomi handed over her pass, heard the agent say, "Welcome aboard, Miss Carter," and stepped onto the aircraft with her head high.